On today's show, we bring you an electrifying episode 6 of the Real Recovery podcast. Brace yourselves as Roger recounts his harrowing brush with death via a gunshot, a pivotal moment that sparked his incredible journey from the depths of addiction to the peaks of recovery. Join us for a gripping tale of survival, transformation, and the relentless pursuit of a life reclaimed.
Hello, and welcome to the Real Recovery Podcast. I'm Julie, your co-host, on this journey of healing and transformation. Together with my co-host, Peter, we dive into the heart of recovery, sharing stories that resonate with courage and inspiration.
That's right, Julie. Each episode is a new chapter in this vast narrative of recovery, and we're honored to bring them to you. But keep in mind the perspectives you'll hear are for informational purposes only and may not reflect the views of the podcast or our partners.
Indeed, while these conversations can be a powerful part of your recovery toolkit, they are not substitute for professional medical advice. We encourage you to seek guidance from your healthcare provider for any treatment-related decisions.
And if you're facing an immediate crisis, or if you just need to talk to someone who understands, don't hesitate to call the Recovery Crisis Line at 503-223-85. That number is also on our website. Help is available 24/7.
Now let's begin our episode
of recovery, real recovery.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, I am really grateful that you are here. Just for some history, Ben and I have been partners, not in the romantic kind. He's been the in-person Sunday night meeting secretary, and I have been the Zoom host, Sunday night secretary. So we have never stood each other up. So we've had a pretty good partnership.
Oh, yeah.
Trust me, because I fill in a lot and whatnot. And you've done a good job of providing a chair too. It's been good. And it's Sunday night competes with the men's meeting. And I think it's been really good for the newcomer for us to have consistency, because we get more of the newcomers, because a lot of the veterans go to this other meeting. And I think it's good to have a consistent meeting every night. And then the other thing about the Sunday night meeting, or even extended family, is it's a lot of people that cannot get to the meeting, physically cannot get to the meeting. So it's a good Al is the best example. Our friend Al can't always get to the meeting. So
Right.
it's
People who are more housebound or don't have, I think the Zoom, it does have a great value for that. As I prefer in-person meetings personally.
Mhm.
I like that interconnection, but if it weren't for the Zoom meetings.
I love both. I love Friday in person because we see the whole crew. But there's something about Zoom that saves me 45 minutes from traveling there.
Right.
45 from traveling back. And I work Sundays. So I'm Sunday through Thursday, and it's still, I can get to the meeting. Whereas if I had to drive there, I can't promise you that I would. So it relieves a lot of excuses.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Ben. I'm Peter, co-host of the Real Recovery Podcast, and I'm so glad that you're here to talk about your journey and hopefully give some insight or inspiration or just even one component. I go to a lot of meetings that I've gone to. I may hear 10 people share, but one person will have to say something. I'm like, whoa, click. So I hope that we have that same effect with our show. Julie already introduced you a little bit, so I'd like to hear about your story, your beginnings, where you came from and how you got here today.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for all of that. And thank you for having me. This is one of the things that I'm trying to do, is to say yes to doing things. And what you just talked about right now, which was maybe possibly somebody out there can hear something that will actually help them in that moment they're hearing it. That is exactly what I aim to do, is just to provide some sort of, allow somebody else to have a connection and realize they're not alone, and they don't have to be alone. Off mic, we were just talking about the experience of sharing your story. And I'm fortunate, I think, or at least I learned early on from my sponsor that if you're going to tell your story, you need to get to the solution at some point. Like, why are you here? Because you're an alcoholic. And why are you sitting here? Because there's a solution. I absolutely would not be alive if it weren't for AA. So I just want to get that right out of the way. Like the only reason I'm living and breathing and have a job and have all the things that I have in my life is because AA has shown me the way how to do things differently. I'm originally from El Paso, Texas. I come from a big Hispanic family. I have 4 sisters. 3 of them are older. 1 is younger. The first 5 years of my life, I was the youngest and I was also the only boy. So that made me extra special. I think that extra special attention lasted to this day. It lasts, but it maybe did a number on me because I got anything that I wanted. I really did. I was the only boy. I had 3 sisters who I was their only little toy to play with, the little boy. And I just got a lot of love. I really did. I got a lot of love from my sisters and I got a lot of love from my parents. Now, in saying that, I will also go on to say that my home life was not perfect. My parents were a little bit older by the time that they had me. I think my dad was in his late 30s and my mom was like in her mid 30s. And they were just and I only say that because by the early 80s, they were just of a very different generation. They were born in the 1940s and they were born in circumstances of lower income Hispanic population in El Paso, Texas. A lot of things that were happening in my life were new, not only to me, but to my family as well. My dad was doing really well. And my parents were young when they got married and immediately had kids. And so I don't think that my parents knew how to express their emotions very well. And that's because of the whole traditional thing. They were raised in a different era and divorce just never seemed to be an option for them. There was a lot of chaos in my household growing up, in addition to the love. But what I've come to understand now as I get older is that Latins in particular are just a little bit more notorious for, I love you so much. I would rather beat you than see you do something I disagree with. Now that I only do this because I love you, that kind of attitude. And that was totally the household I grew up in. So when I was a young kid, I started developing this sense that I was different from other boys, probably kicked in around 8 or 9. And it was around that time that I was also just developing my own taste in things that I knew weren't necessarily mainstream with boy culture. Like I knew that I did not like sports. I knew that it just bored me. It's like showing a cat a computer. What do I do with that? I don't understand. Get it out of my face. It's not because I think it's stupid. It's just because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't register. So I knew that was like one giant thing that set me apart from other boys. But then, so I had 3 older sisters who were all teenagers when I was a little kid. And so I was like exposed to Duran, Depeche Mode, Madonna, all these, and Prince, Cyndi Lauper, like all these 80s artists that were really bold and colorful. And that's what I was drawn to. I was drawn to the drama, and all I wanted to do was like watch MTV, and I was exposed to, and my parents, part of the whole, they did things a little bit differently. They had no rules on it. Cable was like in every TV, in every room, and there was no restrictions about what we could or couldn't watch. And
wow.
It's a kid's dream.
Yeah, no, I had a Nintendo and cable in my room for like my 9th birthday or something. Like I said, I was spoiled. Yeah. So I took that and ran with it. I developed a taste for like horror movies and just became this kind of like cool little personality, but I was definitely an odd duck, but not so much. I was really privileged and I went to a good school, public school, where it was just a good mix of kids and no one was ever really picked on and no one was ever really ostracized for being different. We even had one kid who was like really flaming. And I don't think anybody even mentioned it once to him. I honestly don't. In my head, I was judging him, but that was like, how aren't you aware? Hello, tone it down. But he was cool. All that to say, I just want to get to my early teens, because it was my early teens when I think I took a really hard left turn or right turn. The story that I like to, the story that I really strongly identified with is the story of Pinocchio. Pinocchio really wants to be a real live boy. And more than anything, Pinocchio wants to have a connection with other human beings, like this father character, Geppetto, and he wants to do right and he wants this and that. But like on the way to school, he meets a fox, and the fox gets him curious into taking a detour and breaking the rules and just doing things a little differently that day. And he follows the fox to the circus, where he learns all about just cutting loose and having fun and letting it go. And then Pinocchio is turned into a donkey and lost. I feel like that happened to me. I really do.
I love that.
Yeah,
You know?
it relates very much.
Yeah. Before I knew it, I had a donkey tail. That was like my experience as a teenager, because I did lose my way on my way to school. I just started hanging out with the wrong kids. Hormones started kicking in. They understanding what homosexuality meant for me and how that set me apart from other kids was all just really huge stuff started hitting me when I was in my early teens. God and spirituality. I remember distinctly when I was maybe 11 or 12, I was raised in a really strict Catholic, not strict, very devout Catholic household.
Same.
And my mom she just did not like that question at all. Any questions about God or Jesus or religion. And I started just questioning things at a really young age. I started questioning, wait a minute, but what about dinosaurs? And wait a minute, how old is the earth? And wait a minute, this and that. And none of those questions really had any answers, and they still don't. But I just remember feeling like that was not allowed. I wasn't allowed to question things, and that it was wrong to question things. Like, not only that I wasn't allowed, but that there was something wrong with the idea that I would question things like Jesus and Mary and Joseph and God. And it was around that time that I also was really developing an interest in boys, or the interest in finding other people like me or other kids like me, because I wanted what all the other 13-year-old hormone developing kids wanted. I wanted that special connection with somebody that like thought I was attractive and made me feel the butterflies, in my stomach. Like, all that was happening. And as I began to realize that part of me was probably considered wrong also, I just started developing this really strong feeling of there's nothing wrong with me. It's the rest of everybody else. Everybody else is the one with the problem. It's not me. And through the lens of a 13-year-old, the maturity level of a 13-year-old. And going back to my music culture, growing up with really strong attachment to flamboyance and artistry and music, that was the beginning. It was the grunge era. And a lot of the music I was listening to was suddenly really drug infused. And I just started to be drawn to these really tragic characters who had all embraced drugs and alcohol, and who had used it for their own artistic purposes or relied on it and were very expressive about it. And those people became like my icons, my religious icons. Whereas my mother had like Jesus, I had like her cocaine, or just like those obsessions started developing where I was just looking up to as role models, these people that were, with time and age, I've come to understand the people who had addiction issues. So I gravitated towards the wrong group of kids. But then at the same time, around 1995, when I was 13, my family got the first home computer. And with that computer came the internet. This was like 1995. So in 7th grade, I got on to AOL for the first time.
AOL.
And I began scanning chat rooms for the first time. And I don't remember the first time, but I do remember the first time I saw the room Bears for Bears or something like that. And I was like, that's charming. What is that room about? Like, I thought it was like stuffed animal related. When I came across the room, because I was I was born in El Paso, but my family moved to Dallas, Texas when I was 10. And that's really where I grew up, is Dallas, Texas. And so I came across the AOL chat room, Dallas M for M. And I think it didn't take me too long for that to really click of what that meant. So When I was 13, that was a big age for me because that's how old I was when I first started smoking pot. That's how old I was when I first started drinking, had my first blackout drunk. And that's the first year that I started meeting strange men off the internet.
Wow.
And
That's a lot for 1 year.
Yeah, it's a lot. It was the first year and age that I just stopped going to school for prolonged periods of time. That inner world that I was talking about a moment ago, where I started to feel like, you know what, I need to protect who I am. Like, not everybody needs to know who I am because other people are not going to understand, because I'm okay with my homosexuality and I'm okay with the idea that maybe possibly there is no God and that life is all about just living in the moment and having fun. Those concepts were starting to take formation in my young mind. And I started to feel like I just needed to play along with everybody's rules, but really I'd be breaking all the rules at the same time and just trying to get away with as much as I could get away with. And that's what I started doing. But I was also hanging out with a motley crew of kids who were all, for the most part, of these broken homes. And there was very little supervision happening with them. And so I just started skipping school with them. I started smoking pot with them. The first time I smoked pot, I freaked out, had a panic attack and started crying. Yeah, I thought everything was moving in slow motion and then the room was spinning and I was just freaking out. That should have got me to stop, but it didn't. I don't even remember thinking twice about smoking it the second time. And the same thing with alcohol. All I remember is we filled a glass full of gin and orange juice, and it was at a friend's house, and not having any idea about how to drink liquor, I just started chugging basically gin and orange juice. And the next thing I know, it's 2 days later and my friend's waking me up and telling me that I've been in a blackout for the last 13 hours and I peed on myself. That was my first drinking experience somewhat. But my behavior just got really crazy when I was 13 and in 7th grade. One of the first guys that I met off the internet, we'll call him Bryce. He was in his early 20s. He was 21. He said that he had moved to Dallas from Montana and that he'd come from living on a ranch or some situation like that. I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm pretty sure he was in the age range that he said he was, because he said he was 21. Maybe he was 25. I have no idea. I don't think he was 30 because I think he would have looked a little extra older to me at that point. But I was 13, he was 21, and he wanted to be my boyfriend.
Wow.
So he became my boyfriend, and I would skip class and hang out with him. And he convinced me that as a way to memorialize our relationship, we should both get our tongues pierced. He convinced me to skip class and he took me to a tattoo piercing parlor downtown where he told them, the piercer, that I was 16 and that he was friends with my older brother. And they pierced my tongue and they pierced his tongue. And then he took me back to school and dropped me off at my middle school.
That place is so lucky I wasn't your mom.
I know. My parents, I don't think I would ever. No, I would. I feel comfortable enough. I'm 41 years old. We're talking about something that happened. Let's do the math. 28 years ago. Yeah. So yeah, I was crazy. I was a crazy kid. And so through therapy, and I'll talk about therapy. My therapist has really along the way helped me understand that when I make statements like I was really crazy, or I was unsupervised, I was without direction, I was without guidance. And that's exactly what a child does when they're unsupervised, and what they don't have the proper guidance is they just start acting like kids and trying to do whatever they want. And that's exactly what I did.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you saying he was 21 to 25. Did he know your true age?
He did. He did know my true age. And he wasn't the only guy. There's things that I like to laugh about and joke about. The fact of the matter is I broke up with him. I was 13 and I broke up with him. And there was just a lot, the idea that I could lie whenever I wanted, whenever I wanted to get away with what I wanted to get away with, it just became part of my very fabric of my existence because I wanted to smoke pot with my friends. I wanted to go and meet these guys off the internet, and I wanted to keep experiencing life on this very extreme but very scary level, doing things that would probably scare other kids. I was just, for some reason, attracted to it. It was an attractive nuisance to me to go meet strange men off the internet. And that's what I began to do. It was like when I was 15 that I was meeting a lot of various people, and it had become a habit for me that I was well acquainted with, that I started to really realize how dangerous my behavior was. And I became aware of how serious and how very real HIV was. And I began to get really scared. And I was scared because I was afraid that I had already screwed up and that I'd already gotten positive. And that just began to terrify me. And what happened after that is I developed this fear, that I began to live with this giant ball of fear in the pit of my gut and anxiety that began to rule my life. And I became convinced that my life was already over before it started, and that I just needed to escape reality as much as possible. And I just needed to find ways to have fun for the rest of my life, because who knows how long that's going to be. Mm-hmm. And I just stopped going to school, and I just started pursuing. That's when alcohol really, for the first time, I think, showed up as my best friend. And it was in the form of beer. Can't go through all the nitty gritty details of how I was acquiring it all the time. I just was. I had older male friends from the internet who would buy me beer, but I was also running around with a group of kids who had easy access to money and supplies and just ways of acquiring 18 packs all the time whenever anybody wanted it. So alcohol just became a staple of my life because all my friends were drinking, and that was just my way of connecting with other people. Mm-hmm. And all the older men that I was meeting off the internet, they were supplying me with alcohol also. And it was around that time that I started using cocaine and are we allowed to talk about that at all?
Absolutely.
Okay. So it's hard to relate to some people sometimes still because of the terminal uniqueness, but because by the time, I think being around AA as long as I have now, because I first came in the rooms in 2009, when I was 27, I've since seen a lot of people come in pretty broken. And as I've gotten older, the newcomer, as they come in, they've stayed the same more or less. It's a mid to 20 age range. And they come in broken because of where they're at in their life. And for me, I discovered some really low lows by the time I was 15 that I think it did break me. I just didn't have a solution. I didn't have access to a solution. Mm-hmm. So I chose to just continue seeking problematic behavior, problematic solutions to behavior. No one at the age of 15 should know what it's like to be unable to go to sleep because your heart feels like it's going to explode because you've been snorting coke all night, and there's still gay porn playing on the TV of the older gentleman whose house that you're at. And you know in your heart, as the sun is coming up and you're nowhere, sleep is nowhere in sight, and your hands are all greasy for obvious reasons. Your body's all greasy. And you know that everyone who loves and cares about you is probably terrified because they have no idea where you are. Those experiences started happening to me when I was 15. And that really messed with my psyche.
I can imagine. I wasn't ready for that at 15.
Yeah. It was pretty heavy. And my only escape I began to carry around a lot of shame. This internal feeling of I'm broken, I'm damaged, I'm disgusting, I'm maybe diseased, I'm this, I'm that. And it just began to take over my entire identity. So mixed in with that, it wasn't all bad, because in between living in fear of this certain death of doom, I was also managing to have a lot of fun with my friends. I was also doing other things like LSD and more mind expanding drugs, and started going to 90s raves, and started going to concerts. It was ecstasy and those sorts of things. But my life always revolved around escaping. And by the time I was 17, 18, the story I just told about watching the sun come up and your heart racing, that started to become like a more frequent thing. And I started for the first time when I was 17 or 18, beginning to think, I think I have a problem with cocaine. Because every time I knew it was related to alcohol, but I never wanted to admit that because like, how could I turn against the one thing in the world that means everything to me? I don't know, you leave alcohol out of it. It has nothing to do with it. It's cocaine. And I say that because I would always go on a vicious, like zombie. I need to hunt it down. I need to find it. And once I have it, I'm going to have great sex. And it's just this idea that once I got my hands on it, everything was going to be okay or memorable or something. But I started disappearing from the crowd to go hunt it down at bars and clubs and wherever we were. And I started to think, okay, other people are going to start to notice this, that I have a problem. And they did. They probably did because I was just such a wild, crazy character. And that just became more and more frequent. So for long before I came to AA or realized, no, really, this is much bigger than that. Like alcohol and all these other drugs are but a symptom of something else. Like long before all that, I just thought I had a problem with cocaine and it was really just cocaine. But around the time that I was 18, all my friends that I had hung out with, and by the way, I came out at 14. So being gay was like always part of my story with other people. I came out at 14 to the majority of people in my life and to my parents because my relationship with my parents really, it just became chaotic because they didn't know what to do with me. They were not these terrible parents who were just absent all the time. That's not the case. They just really had no idea how to approach the problem that they were dealing with. But they kept loving me and they kept helping me. They were finding things that parents shouldn't find in a young boy's bedroom of a variety of things. And they knew that something was happening and something was going on. So when I was 18, a lot of my friends started applying themselves to further their education and they were all going off to school and stuff. Meanwhile, I hadn't attended school since I was like 16. I think I stopped officially when I was a sophomore or something. So I had no plans, but I decided to just randomly go take my GED so that if I passed, I could then apply to community college because it would give me something to do. So I went into the GED and I passed. I don't really remember, but I was working at the time and I convinced my father that if he would help me go to New York, I would go to a community college there. So he agreed and I saved up a little bit of money, but really didn't matter because he was going to help me. And in 2001, the summer of 2001, I moved to New York City. And September 11th happened right after I moved there. That was a shock and that was a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, I was 18 when I got there and I turned 19 a couple of weeks before September 11th. So I was there for that and that was a lot. That was the first time in my life that I stopped drinking as such having access to it. And when I was in New York City, I was just terrified of, so far I wasn't dead and that meant a lot. But yeah. I was pretty convinced that like I was already like a walking target for death, that it was coming. I just hadn't hit it yet. So it made me like extra cautious. A big city, strange place. Oh my God, terrorists are blowing up buildings. Let's just behave. And I cleaned my act up. Like most kids had already been living a clean life and now they were acting out. The reverse happened for me. I was really chaotic and crazy as an early teen. And then when I was in New York, when I was 19, I actually started going to class for the first time in a long time. And then I started enjoying class. And then I started making good grades, but the chaotic behavior was still there. Every time I got drunk, nonsense would happen. This is another thing that I developed as a teenager. I discovered adult bookstores as a teenager. I started going to adult bookstores when I was probably, as soon as I had a license to drive, I was going to adult bookstores, usually in a really drunken state. And so every time I got drunk in New York City, that's where I would go. I would go to the bookstore, and who knows what would happen and who knows where I would wake up. And that just became part of my story too.
Mm-hmm.
So I started calming down the drinking while I was in New York, and I was there for 2 years. I did so well at community college that I was willing to try to transfer and apply to a bigger university. So I just applied to the University of Texas in Austin, and I actually got in. And that was a big deal. I didn't go to high school, and suddenly I'm going to the state school.
Yeah.
What's transition?
What's that?
What a transition.
Yeah, it was. And I moved to Austin in 2003, and I moved there with a lot of ambition because I was driven for the first time in my life. I was still living in fear of this very obvious thing. I could never do the math myself. I could never realize, wait a minute. You're telling me that every time you get drunk, all this bad stuff happens. So maybe you just need to stop getting drunk. Like I couldn't figure that out for myself. And I was unwilling to figure that out for myself because I just had this very basic grounding, like one of my principles was life is not worth living without escaping it occasionally.
Yeah.
It was a foreign concept to me that anybody would want to live their life exposed to just not being able to get in touch with that inner artist, or I don't know. It all sounds so silly now when you're young and all you're doing is just trying to find yourself. You're looking.
So I was afraid of what would be there if I didn't drink, escaping. You know, that was a big fear of mine too. So I relate to that. Yeah.
I got to Austin. And I continued to do well in school, but I started drinking regularly again. I turned 21 when I was living in Austin. And so the bar scene suddenly became like part of my life.
Yeah.
And I found my cocaine dealer at the bar. So that became a problem because now I knew where to get it. And that just became my regular everyday connection. Was not daily, but it became daily. But it became my scene. And Austin is a big drinking city, and its nightlife is a lot of fun. And that's where I thought I wanted to live. And that's where I thought I wanted to spend the rest of my life, was in bars.
Me too.
Yeah. Like I did not want the party to stop. I wanted to exist under a disco ball forever.
Yeah.
Loves the cocaine in the bathroom and endless drink tabs and all the personalities and all the skin. And I loved it. And the strobe lights, and the music. It was a lot of fun. And I'm dangerously close to, what is it? Glorify? What's the word?
Oh, glorifying it.
Glorifying it. Yeah.
No, it's sometimes in my memories, I think back and it does glorify in my head, like how much fun those times were and how good I felt and how people loved me, quote unquote, and how popular I was. You can really build it up in your head, like how much I miss that. But yeah, there's another side to it, a reality.
Yeah, literally. There is definitely another side to it. And it's very expensive. I guess I developed in my mind this idea that as long as I gave the appearance that I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing, i.e. go to school, my parents would help me and support me. And that's what I did. And I abused that privilege. When I graduated from college in Austin, I definitely had a drinking problem, but it was still confined to bar behavior. It wasn't like I was an at-home daily drinker.
Mm-hmm.
I would drink occasionally to get rid of a hangover, but for the most part, I was like, I showed up at the bar and I was dying for a drink because I hadn't had one yet.
Yeah.
And then when I graduated from college, that's, I think, when it changed. That's when I found myself really unmoored and really thinking like, okay, now what do I do? Because I have no clue what to do with like my liberal arts major. It suddenly meant nothing. And I suddenly was like realizing that I didn't want to work at Whole Foods. Nothing against people who do, but I realized that my drinking and drug habit was expensive and I needed to be able to afford it. How else was I going to live and do what I wanted? So then I just started scheming, like, what can I do? How do I further my education? What's practical? What's a practical solution? And law school sounded practical. Why? Because I could never imagine myself going into medicine. So that was out of the question, being a doctor or anything like that. And I had no math skills to speak of. So I didn't want to take the ACT or any of those other requirements for graduate school. So suddenly law sounded like the thing to do because I love to read and I like writing more or less. And I think I can bullshit my way through things. Okay.
And the salary would pay for your habits.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, because justified working for the escort service because I wouldn't have to sell drugs. I could just buy them.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And make a lot of money easily and not have to pay taxes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I thought that was huge.
That's as much thought as I really put into it. I wish there was more than that. There really wasn't. And by the time I got to law school, I'm skipping along my story because I do want to get to the solution, me getting sober. By the time I got to law school, I was pretty shattered and pretty broken because it's so hard. I don't even know myself from that era anymore because I think it was just alcoholism without any solution whatsoever. And it was just miserable. Mm. I was convinced that no matter what I did, it was going to end bad for me. And that's because my life had become like a revolving circus of drinking and passing out and waking up in places that I didn't know how I got there. And I was always with people I didn't even know and always in somebody's bed and always feeling ashamed and always feeling gross and different and uncontrollable. This feeling of being trapped with a psychotic personality that I couldn't control because every time 4 or 5 drinks in, this other personality would take over and I would feel great for a very brief window of time before the personality shifted again into this other person that really did not care about anybody or anything other than getting high and wanting to get high as fast as I can. And the enjoyable times became less and less. And I began to hate myself. I began to seriously, seriously hate myself. And the only comfort I really found was in buying large bottles of wine and drinking myself to pass out in front of like Lifetime movies and the Golden Girls. Like that became my only reason to live while I was at law school. It was like, I just need to get my Franzia wine or whatever else and just pass out somewhere. That alone. I can't drink vodka or anything like that because the minute I get that in my system, then I go and do other stuff. And I was really miserable in law school and I started entering blackouts and telling people that I wanted to kill myself and became really alarming to everybody in my life that I wasn't going to law school to better myself or to reach my full potential. I was squandering that by becoming a daily drinker and a problematic drinker. And then after I got my first DUI, so it became obvious to everybody that I needed help. And my family had an intervention with me, them coming together and constantly saying, we think you have a problem. We think you have a problem. And I was willing to admit at that time around September of 2009 that yes, I do have a problem. And that was my second year of law school. And I went to my first AA meeting in October of 2009. And I remember a little bit of it. I remember the guy I had a crush on. The only experience I had with a room full of gay men was bars. I was 27 and I went in there and I found who I thought was cute and I just made the decision, okay, I'm going to stick around so I can talk to them. And I did. I stuck around until the end. I think I introduced myself as a newcomer, but I'm honestly having a lot of trouble remembering it. But I do remember this guy and I still know him, by the way. I still know where he is out there in the world. And I didn't know at the time, I met his partner. And his partner was the one that was friendly with me. And he really just was nice to me as a newcomer, but then turned his back and walked the other direction. And I thought, oh, poor me. He doesn't think I'm cute. Oh, meanwhile, this other guy must think I'm cute because he really wants to talk to me. But now he wants to get my phone number. Oh, this is really starting to work out in my favor. All right. Click my cha-cha heel. Not over yet. And yeah, of course, like he wanted my information because he wanted me to feel free to reach out to him if I was thinking of drinking that night or the next night. And I didn't stay sober after that first meeting. I remember I went to a 7-Eleven and I bought a bottle of wine because like, how could I not? This wasn't going to happen yet. And I probably went to another half dozen or so meetings doing that exact same thing of showing up, putting a lot of effort into what I was wearing, and then showing up and then, looking at everybody up and down, trying to figure out who was cute enough, who was okay, and who I would settle for. And just because it's such a similar thing.
So
Like,
because
I could totally
I went
relate
to
to
a
that.
gay men's meeting because I knew they didn't want to sleep with me, and I felt safe. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just had such a childlike idea of what AA was. I remember the first time somebody asked me if I'd worked the steps, and they were written on the wall on the traditional banner form. And in all seriousness, he asked me, he's like, are you working the steps? How do you work the steps? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm working them. And he's like, oh yeah, what step are you on? I was like, I'm probably on that one. And he was like, wait, what? I was like, yeah, because like I admitted I'm powerless sober alcohol and that I have a problem. Check. Came to believe, sure. And he's like, that's not how the steps work. You don't just run through them in your mind and say, yeah, I'm doing that. Yeah, I'm doing that. So that's the way I thought the steps worked for a while. But, who was my first sponsor? David, I think, was my first sponsor. He didn't stay sober. In fact, I don't know if it's a Black Widow's curse, but I've had a lot of sponsors go out, and I'm sure that's just the case, but I've had a lot of sponsors that I've worked with who are no longer sober. And David was a great guy. David made me feel special because he was extremely attractive. And that's what I was looking for in a sponsor. And he was young and attractive and very nice.
Honestly, that is so funny because my
Yeah.
first sponsor was 76 years
Oh, really?
old. Yeah, that's just hysterical.
Yeah.
None of my sponsors have gone back up.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, no, I think we
Oh
were
my
looking
God.
for different qualities.
Yeah. And David, I think he have asked me too, because I remember there were a couple of years there where I would almost feel like, what's the matter with me? Nobody is asking me if they to be their sponsee. What I just announced myself. I'm a newcomer. Hello, line up. You're supposed to introduce yourselves. As a kid coming into AA, I didn't take it seriously. It just seemed I didn't know what else to do with my life because I was willing to admit that I had a very serious problem with alcohol, and that was not going to change. That I wanted my life to change. I really wanted my life to change because it had just become inescapable, the misery every time I drank. And I was already 27 at that point. So it was beginning to click. This is now like all my friends have moved on from the college level drinking and have started to get jobs and started to acquire things and just figure out who they are as people. And I'm not. I'm still this kid. It used to be a secret, but now it's not so much a secret. I'm still that middle school dropout who's meeting guys off the internet.
Right.
That has not changed. And I really started to realize that about myself and started to hate myself for it. This is disgusting. Like, how am I ever going to change my life if every time I get drunk and every time I get my hands on drugs and I'm drunk, I'm just cruising Craigslist or whatever form of that was in 2009. So I didn't make a sincere effort to get and stay sober. I remember it was Christmas Eve and a friend came to visit me. It was the 2 days before Christmas. So 2 days before Christmas, a friend came and visited me. And all this time throughout my crazy, wild teenage years and my time in Austin as a crazy, wild, drunken college student, I had been pulled over by the cops many times. I had been in blackouts while being pulled over by the cops, but I had never been arrested, ever. I had many run-ins with law enforcement, but they never taken me in. I just been very extremely lucky.
I had some of that luck too. As we talked in my story. Yeah.
Not my luck.
Yeah, I did eventually get, but I had many times where I got pulled over. There's times that I should have been thrown in jail and they just park the car, walk home,
right?
Okay.
Yeah. They never wanted to arrest me. They saw it more as a hassle and they were always just willing to let me go. Now that would never fly. And maybe in Portland. Now people are taking it much more seriously. And I had made my first real effort to be sober by working with David. And I think I had gotten like 3 or 4 weeks of sobriety. And then I had a friend come to visit me from Austin to Dallas, where I was going to law school. He came 2 days before Christmas and I was really on the fence, but I decided, you know what, I'm just going to drink and I can get sober again. Really, it won't be a problem. I really want to hang out with my friend and reconnect and have a good time. It's Christmas. I started drinking early in the day. We went over to his friend's house. I kept drinking. I have a few memories in between, but really the next thing I know, I'm in jail. And I got my first DUI. I also had my first major collision with another vehicle while in a drunken stupor. And it was bad. And I lost my car and I gone to jail and I had to get bailed out. Suddenly I had to have a lawyer and I was supposed to be going to school to be a lawyer. And it was just like, it was a serious wake up call to me, but not the kind that would get me sober. It was a wake up call of, yeah, this really sucks. And I don't know how to stop. I really don't know how to stop. I don't know if I want to stop anymore because it just feels so hopeless because I don't know how to stop. Sobriety was just not something that seemed possible for somebody like me because I was carrying around so much shame and guilt and remorse. What separated me from other kids was, or I wasn't even a kid at that point, but what separated me from other law school students or other peers and people and professionals and people who were my age at the time was all those memories I had, all of that behavior.
Yeah.
That still crept up into my life. Every time I got drunk, I'd go home with some stranger from a bar or I'd meet some stranger off the internet. It just felt inescapable. And I started to really wonder, who is the real me? Maybe that is the real me. Maybe I am like very extremely promiscuous and that's just the way I want to live my life. And I can't deny that I like doing drugs. And I can't deny I like this behavior, or else why would I continue to do it? And so I tapped out for a bit. And when I tapped out hard and just became a day drinker every day, even though I was still going to law school, I was really just luck and happenstance that I didn't fail out completely. But in a drunken stupor, once again, I told my parents that I wanted to kill myself. And this time they happened to they took me to the ER because I was just extremely drunk. And they got me to repeat that same statement to a doctor. And once I did that, they put handcuffs on me and they put me in a psych ward for 5 days.
Wow.
While I was, and when I was in that psych ward, I got sober and I had to be sober for 5 days. And that's when everything changed for me. I suddenly started realizing that there is another way, that there's something about this alcoholism that I didn't have to continue living my life that way, that I could make an honest, sincere attempt at doing something differently. And when I got out of the psych ward, I started going to AA and I made it part of my life. I got a new sponsor and I started to work the steps for the first time. Step 1, I admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. That's never really been an issue. I'd never thought of it as an issue for me. That was one of the steps that I learned early on in the process where I felt like, no, I got this. You don't need to remind me all the stuff I've done. That's made me aware of my powerlessness over drugs and alcohol. But one thing I didn't realize then that I realize now that has helped me stay sober for 3.5 years. So my sobriety date is May 6th or May 5th of 2020. I entered detox on May 5th. And so my first 24-hour period is on May 6th. But it's this realization that what powerlessness truly means for me, in my case, is that I guess it's the saying, the first drink gets you drunk, because it's just that acceptance and that realization of I have absolutely no control what happens once I put alcohol in my body.
Mm-hmm.
I can't decide that I want my job, that I want my boyfriend, my lover, my partner, my husband, and that's all the same person. My family, my job. Once I put alcohol in my body, I have to be willing to throw everything away, because I cannot control whether or not I'm going to even be alive in 24 hours or not in a jail cell, or there's no end to the horrible destruction that I'm going to bring into my life, because I don't have any control. I truly do.
Yeah.
And it's taken a lot of years and a lot of experimenting, doing things my way, to realize that for me is my humility that I have to hold on to every single day in my recovery, is that I may not know if there is a monotheistic, traditional Judeo-Christian God. I may not know that. I may not know if the true way is in the Eightfold Path of Buddhism. There are so many questions I don't know the answer to, and I'm okay with that. But the one thing I am certain about is that if I put alcohol in my body, or if I put a mind-altering drug in my body, I could potentially throwing away everything I love and care about and hold dear in my life. Everything that makes life worth living, I may just in that moment be throwing away into the garbage can.
Amen.
Because that's what it does to me. That's what it does. It takes and it takes, and it does not give things back easily.
And you don't know if you're going to make it back again.
Yeah.
And I've known your husband longer than you. So
I know. And so one thing that kind of screwed me, I don't know. One thing that I've always identified with the program is the selfishness. The idea that the alcoholic is a selfish creature.
egotistical,
Mm-hmm.
Only cares about themselves, because that ugly, isolated characteristic that I described that had become my everyday life, that was just entirely selfish. I don't care about you, Mom. I don't care about anybody. I just want to be drunk and alone.
I used to think, this is only affecting me. It's not affecting anybody else. I'm doing it to myself. So get out of my face.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me be.
I kill myself. How dare you get in the way of me killing myself? Because it's my life, not yours.
We're crazy, right?
my daughter changed that for me.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm sure.
Just not her fault. She's a baby. Who's going to take care of her?
Yeah.
I didn't want the things that happened to me to happen to her. When I first came to AA, I had to get the slip signed, but all I wanted from AA was to be a good mom and to get off parole. It's crazy. Different things for different people. Somewhere, I don't know, maybe around the 6th or the 7th year, when I had the mom thing going pretty well, I decided it would be for me and I'm off parole. But luckily, this innocent person who had never done anything wrong to me, right? Because I could blame my parents. My childhood wasn't like yours. I could blame it on hereditary. I could blame it on a lot of things, but you couldn't blame this innocent person for anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was my moment of clarity. Totally. I had that clarity when I was pregnant with her too. When the doctor said, literally, either you terminate your pregnancy or you get off the drugs. And I was like, not this baby's fault. No, seriously. Like it was twice. I tell my child all the time, and she's 31 now, or gonna be 31. Thank you. You saved my life. If it wasn't for her, if it was just me and my karma, and it was no problem. Okay. I don't care if I hurt myself, but I didn't want to hurt her.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mom, I wanted to give it back to. I felt like tit for tat. You had it. I really did. I was, that's crazy. How we think like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The selfishness, that's what propelled my drinking for a long time, was this idea that I really don't care. What it comes down to is it's me that's hurting, and I'm the one who needs this medication to check out of reality. So between the years of 2010 and 2013, I relapsed a lot. Like that, when I got onto the psych ward, I stayed sober for 10 months. And that was the longest I had stayed sober up until that point. And I remember the relapse, and it was like an ugly, gross relapse, but I kept coming back. And probably stayed sober the majority of the time between 2010 and 2013. I was still holding on to, I was still had those reservations about somehow, some way, maybe just the right stars haven't aligned for me. I wasn't done. I just really wasn't done. And I think because I had been holding on to those reservations of maybe somehow, some way, I'll find this solution to just drinking like a gentleman or using cocaine like a gentleman, right?
A professional.
Yeah. And because I was holding on to that, as I began to discover each time a new lower depths of demoralization, I got angrier and angrier and more upset that I, like a child, like I'm not going to get my way. It's just not going to happen. And the more bitter and angry at AA I became at the same time. I had met my partner at the time through AA. His name's Mike. He was 48 when I met him. I was 28, and we developed a relationship. And Mike is still a friend of mine to this day. He's a good man. I just put him through hell. I was a kid, and he decided he wanted to date a kid. And so that's what happens. And he became my crutch because he didn't force me to grow up the way life would have if I didn't have him around to pay all my bills, stuff like that, for example. And I abused him for it. And eventually when I kept relapsing, he said, "You're going to go to rehab or this is it, it's over." So I agreed to go to rehab, came back, couldn't stay sober. My law license became a problem because of my DUI. And because I admitted that I had a problem with alcohol, and then they found out I couldn't stay sober. And so then they were taking away. So during all that time, I passed the bar and I became a lawyer, started practicing as a lawyer. But I was angrier and angrier at AA because I didn't want to be sober. Really, at the end of the day, I didn't know what sobriety really, truly meant. So I kept drinking, and then I went back to rehab. And in 2014, I came to rehab in Oregon. And I got sober for 3.5 years. And that happened because that the demoralization getting worse and worse finally got worse so bad that I was willing to try to change.
Right.
And
I think it's called the bottom.
Yeah. I thought it was the bottom and I thought it was the bottom then. And so from 2014 to 2017, I stayed sober. But what happened is I held on to those reservations. And I don't know when exactly it crept back up into my life, because I do remember that feeling like I had reached my bottom and there was no way I was going to go back, because it was just November of 2013 was not a good month for me. I was in the psych ward twice the week of Thanksgiving. My partner was throwing all my things into garbage bags and throwing me out. I lost my job. I lost my law license. It was all falling apart in November of 2013. Everything. My sanity. That's what really scared me. My sanity. When you wake up in the psych ward twice in 1 week, that's a problem. Maybe.
Perhaps.
It was waking up in the psych ward for the second time in the same goddamn week where I was like, okay, you know what? You got me. I've got a problem. This keeps happening. And so I was willing to change, and I was willing to go to rehab. And so but I agreed that I would go to rehab in Oregon. And that's how I made my way here in December of 2013, how I got sober for the first time. I reached my first 1 year, and I had been in and out of AA since 2009 by that point. I came here, I lived in Portland for a year, away from my old distractions, away from my old stomping ground. And really with a commitment to stay sober. And I got a sponsor that I was working the steps with, came to believe that a power greater than myself keep me sober. And that became AA, because the God thing was still just not still a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to meetings every day, and yeah, and it became and by that point, I lost my law license. I didn't have any money. And so it was the only thing I had in my life was AA. And then after that first year, I really wanted to have an adventure. I wanted to go to South America to teach English, and everyone in my life seemed to think that was a good idea. So I did it. And while I was down in South America, I went to English speaking meetings and Spanish speaking meetings. And I only really made connections with people in the program down there. I was doing everything I think I was supposed to be doing, but I wasn't treating, now I treat my alcoholism as a life-threatening illness. It's so life-threatening that if one thing isn't working entirely, then I need more. So now I have a therapist. Now I go to yoga. Now I do the steps. Now I go to meetings. Now I have a sponsor. Now I read the daily reflections in the morning and I do a prayer. There's like all these things, these tools that I have that I'm using, like my life depends on it because my life does depend on it.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't put all my chickens in my, what's the metaphor?
Eggs in one basket.
All my eggs in one basket.
Your sobriety has to come first because without it, you don't have crap.
Exactly. And somewhere along the line during that time period, I began to lose sight of that. And I began to run the tape of, I'm still crazy. AA is just not working. I'm still this. I'm still that. I was just strongly identifying with all of these things that just in my mind, I wasn't done. And alcohol was so cunning, baffling, and powerful that when I did pick up a drink for the first time in 3.5 years in 2017, I was really convinced that things were going to be different. I was really convinced that
Did you think you were better and that you could handle it now?
That I would never go back to the way it was before. I knew enough now that I'm not going to let it get that bad. It's just not going to happen again. And that's right out the gate. I had a glass of wine on my flight to San Francisco, stayed, don't remember getting to the hotel, don't really remember much of the next day. Remember, there was a couple of people on top of me on the at the bathhouse on Sunday. Remember the guy in the men's bathroom at the bar after that. Remember the cab driver screaming at me that I needed to get out of her cab and that we were at the airport. And that's about it. That was a 3-day experience, starting with making the decision, maybe I can have a glass of wine on the flight. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember anything besides what I just told you from a 3-day trip.
That's crazy. Yeah.
That was me relapsing. So it didn't work out. It was not, I had no power over it. But once I opened that door, it just became relentless. I wanted to escape. I needed to escape. And I started looking for every opportunity to sneak drinks. And it just became a regular part of my life until it became obvious to everybody that I had relapsed. And then by that point, I was willing to give everything up all over again. And I did give everything up. I gave a lot up. And in a year's time, I was pretty broken and had done a lot of things I had never done before. And drugs just became like harder drugs, like meth became a much bigger part of my story. And I went to 3 rehabs in 2018 because that kind of became like my solution was, okay, I'll get sober long enough for you to send me on a plane to a different city and I can meet an entirely new group of people. And it's just like a vacation, basically.
Rehab can only get you clean. It doesn't keep you clean.
Yeah. And so that just became my thing. And then honestly, moving to Portland in 2019, that was still part of the plan. I was still like lost and untethered and trying to find my way. And when I got sober in 2020, May of 2020, I just did the math in my head and realized, okay, I'm 37 now. If I don't stop drinking the way that I'm drinking, like I will be 50 and nothing to show for it. Because right now I'm 37 and I have nothing to show for the last 10 years that I've been out of law school. Nothing other than 5 rehabs. And since I've graduated law school, my friends have gone on to own houses and get good jobs and get married and all these other things. I've managed to go to 5 rehabs, get arrested another time, like all this stuff. And I just started to realize just for the first time, just really admitting to myself, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
I really don't know how to do this.
It's funny how it takes us so long to get to that point. You'd think first time, a normie would be like, okay, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
But we have to keep revisiting and reanalyzing and
yeah. It's
Yeah.
Losing my freedom was the hardest thing, but probably the best thing. It's a different kind of rehab, I promise you. But it gives you a timeout when you don't even have your freedom.
Yeah.
It's a different experience. I don't know how to explain it to you, but when you can't even pick out your socks or your shoes or when you can shower or what you can eat, it is a different experience. Thank God it was a powerful enough experience for me, but it was the timeout personally I needed. And I went to treatment quite a few times too.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. I
Yeah.
used to really be ashamed of it. And I am in some atmospheres, but I now think that it probably saved my life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I realize that I'm not going to have any life whatsoever unless I make AA, make recovery my priority. And I try to remind myself of that. I try to go to meetings consistently. I try to volunteer. I try to say yes to doing things like this. I don't know. The God thing used to be such a hang up for me, but it's not. It truly hasn't been for the last 3 years of this sobriety, because I've just learned how to nobody knows the situation of God. Like, we're all it's about keeping an open mind. That's what it's really about for me.
It's what it says in the book.
Yeah.
That it doesn't say you have to believe in God now to be cured. It says you have the willingness to think that there's something greater, and there is. Whether it's just a group, then there's God, group of drunks. I think honestly, there's something greater. Sobriety is greater than using. And the God thing was a lot for me as well, because I was mad at God, even though I was very religious, went to a Catholic school. How could he let me be molested as a child? How could he let my parents get rid of me at 9 months and leave me with a nanny until 11 years old? How could he let my mom move me across? And I was so resentful. And it wasn't until honestly, like my 10th year sobriety, that I had an epiphany while I was talking to this crazy lady, and I do mean crazy, that he was actually looking out for me the whole time. I'm not dead. You're not dead.
I'm not dead.
And we have every right to be. So who was looking out for us? And I also realized my child was never taken from me. I've been able to graduate from college, right?
Yeah.
Be successful. And I know from my past experiences, and I just started therapy this last year, okay? And I don't think I was ready until 20 years sober, but that literally only 18% people with my history make it. So what a miracle are we?
Right? Yeah, truly. The whole God thing, the way I look at it now is there is sanity and insanity.
Amen.
And sometimes there's a spectrum in my life. And God is on the sane side. Me thinking that life is pointless and it's all BS anyways, that's insanity.
And that you can do it alone.
That I
by
know
yourself.
how to live my life without AA, that's insanity. I learned how to see that now. So the minute that voice does come in that starts complaining, there's no God anyways, or blah, 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 that's the insanity. It's just the noise. And that's when I need to seek a quiet time or go to a meeting and listen to somebody else. Especially what I love is like when I'm having that moment where the noise is going off in my head, and some newcomer starts sharing, and I hear them say, I don't know how to stop drinking, and I'm terrified of going home tonight alone because I don't know how I'm going to make it with the night without drinking. And that reawakens all those horrible memories I have of knowing exactly what it feels like to be shaking and still jittery and all of it, the nightmare. And that makes me like want to be there for the newcomer or want to help somehow.
Yeah. I agree.
I don't know if any of that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I live in Southeast Portland. Peter will tell you, my condo's decent and whatever, but 1 block from my house is a row of trailers. Okay. And you can see drug addiction at its best. And for me, I'm always like, you're one chance from getting high and you'll lose it all. and being there, and I'm really lucky. My daughter's never seen me do a drug, and that really means something to me.
Yeah.
And she's pretty excited about this podcast as well.
Oh, cool.
She's our first fan, our first follower.
Nice. I'm going to listen now. Yeah. So I have my own form of God in my life. I have my own higher power in my life. I have worked the steps with my sponsor. I've had the same sponsor for 3.5 years. Like I said at the very beginning, I would not be here if it wasn't for AA. I really know that to the bones.
Me too.
And I know that I can't be here without it. And that's okay. I've come to accept that. It used to really burn me up as a younger person.
Do you know how lucky you are?
Yeah.
I actually think that we, right?
I know I'm lucky.
In AA are so much luckier
Right.
than any other people in the world. And because, first of all, we have each other. Okay, not everybody has this close-knit, chosen family.
Yeah.
Not everybody gets to live their life sober. And I truly believe living your life sober is better than any day drunk or partying. And I don't know. I've grown up in AA, being sober since I was 32. I've been so lucky to never stick a needle in my arm again.
Oh, me too.
And how did I get to be lucky in Portland? #1 city of addiction. How did I get to survive and be so lucky to have a job, to have a roof over my head, to be able to drive legally, with insurance? Yeah.
Just that's my message is I'm only here because of AA. And this is still a work in progress. The promises are coming true for me, but I can only keep the things in my life if I continue to work a program.
Exactly.
And you said work in progress. That's why it's progress, not perfection. That is one of my favoriteest parts of the whole big book, because I've made a million mistakes sober, but I continue, you know what I'm saying? That whole onion thing.
Yeah.
It's true.
I go to bed sober, I get up sober, and I can start all over again.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
We only have today.
And in your life today, you alluded, you have a partner or husband?
I have a husband, I have a puppy, and I'm a lawyer.
And you're a lawyer, and you have a license, you have a nice car, it looks like.
Oh, yeah.
So, there, it is possible for those who are where you were when you, in your story that you were talking about those times when it was so dark and you had those horrible feelings and you were just kind of lost. If you're there now today, listening to this is your future.
I have a question. How long has your husband been sober?
He has 9 years, and if he stays sober until April 19th, he'll have 10 years.
I met him at MCC Church years ago.
I met him there too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the night we were at True Colors, and so I didn't want to go to True Colors that night. I literally went for the ice cream because everybody said 50 Licks ice cream was really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't there for the drag show, believe it or not. And I went there that night and I was nervous. I made Marty meet me there. And Roger. And I went there for the ice cream. I got the ice cream and I hear Julie. And I turn around and it was him. And then I got married.
Oh.
And he shows me the pictures and I'm like, man, John. And then remember I told you I'm like, I was your husband. But it was very cool for me to see two guys that I liked and respected that were together. And it's you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I think having a partner in AA sometimes is a blessing because they get it. I wouldn't say the first year it's good. And I wouldn't say going in and trying a 13th step is good.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I only practice the 14th step. I've never bring Tupperware to every event. Yeah, take home food. But yeah.
Thank you so much, Ben, for being on our show. And I think you're just awesome. So I'm so glad I got to meet you and hear your story. And I relate to lots of, like I said, every time someone opens their mouth, I'm like, I relate to that. I relate to that.
I think we all have different stories, but
Yeah.
there's so much stuff we can relate to
Yeah.
in different ways. And I think I agree with you. Just doing this is a different way to keep service. And I'm hoping for some of the people we know, when they're like out of town or whatever, they can take us with them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If
Yeah,
they don't
totally.
feel
Yeah.
comfortable or whatnot. Because I have to tell you, I'm not that girl that just always goes to a meeting somewhere else. It takes me a hot second to get comfortable somewhere because I'm so comfortable with us.
Yeah.
Thanks again. And
welcome.
for
Thank you.
Julie and I, realrecoverypodcast.com. Thanks for joining us and thanks for listening.
Thanks for coming with us today. I appreciate it more than anything.
Thank you for asking.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks to each and every one of you for lending us your ears and hearts. Your engagement is what fuels our passion and keeps this podcast thriving.
We cherish the moments we share here and hope they resonate with you, whether you're on a daily commute, at the gym, or just taking a moment for yourself.
Make sure to head over to our website at realrecoverypodcast.com. While you're there, subscribe to our newsletter for the latest insights and uplifting stories from our community delivered straight to your inbox.
Click that subscribe button on your favorite podcast player too, so you can keep up with every new episode. It's your support that keeps our conversation alive and meaningful.
And if our stories have touched you, consider using the donate button on our site. Your contributions, no matter the size, are deeply appreciated. They help us continue our mission of sharing hope and healing.
Join us beyond the podcast and follow our journey on social media. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and on X, formerly known as Twitter. All the links are on our site, so you can stay connected and be a part of the Real Recovery community every day.
Your likes, shares, and comments not only spread the message of recovery, but also remind us that we're all in this together.
So, until we meet again, remember that recovery is a journey, not a destination, and we'll be here to accompany you every step of the way to recovery. Real recovery.
Thanks for listening.